Hi everybody, so great to see all of you. Thanks for joining us again. This is going to be a great session. It's one of my favorite topics, which is bubbles. So we're going to let some people jump on here. I know everybody is just getting going. Hopefully work is done and you've got a glass of champagne in your hands. I'm coming to you, of course, from my office in the Napa Valley, where harvest is winding down. I bet a lot of Cabernet producers are breaking out some champagne right now. It's been a pretty good harvest, kind of a cool year, a late year. So let's see. It's really fun to see all of you jumping on, and yeah. Hi, Amy Chapelet. Good to see you. Haven't seen you enough. We need to have a glass of champagne together, my friend. Jerusha, hi, how are you? Good to see you as well. Another woman friend who I know will never ever refuse a glass of champagne. I think we drank a little too much Paul Roger that one night, Jerusha, you remember. Anyway, we're gonna start. And I want to remind everyone that Champagne Day is coming up, right? It's Friday. So every day this week, we are doing an Instagram Live on some aspect of champagne and taking all of your questions and comments. And tonight, our topic is bubbles. And I'll explain a little bit later how you can win a little bit of champagne swag, good little fun items from us. I'll tell you about that later. But let's talk bubbles. So, how does champagne, in fact, get its bubbles, and how many are there? You know, it can seem like a frivolous question, but it's actually not frivolous at all, and not all bubbles are created equal. You know, bubbles can be, as in cola, just injected into any drink, but bubbles don't happen that way in champagne. And in fact, the process by which champagne gets its bubbles is both long, painstaking, and requires a considerable amount of skill. So with champagne, the bubbles are created, as many of you know, in each individual bottle. After the blend is made and bottled, the winemaker adds to each bottle a little bit of sugar and yeast, then caps the bottle. The predictable happens, right? We all know the yeast begin to eat the sugar, giving off the natural byproduct carbon dioxide. But because the bottle is capped, the carbon dioxide has no place to go. It's trapped, and it dissolves back into the liquid as a distillation, I suppose. Not a distillation, but it's dissolved as a gas back into the liquid. So in fact, if you ask someone, if you picked up a bottle of champagne, let's just pick up this bottle of, this is Paul Roger, but you see that we haven't opened this bottle yet. If someone said, how many bubbles are in this bottle? Technically, the answer is none. There's only the potentiality of bubbles in a closed bottle. You have to open the champagne for all of that dissolved carbon dioxide to sort of burst into bubbles, which is kind of exciting when you think about it. It's all, you know, all that pent up energy waiting to happen. So the question then becomes, how many bubbles? How many, here's my glass of champagne, I'll tell you what I'm drinking in a minute, but how many bubbles do you think are in this glass? I want to see some guesses. Anyone? Oh, I know some of you must have a guess. Life is good with wine, says 1 million. We'll see. Who else has a guess? That's an awful lot for a single glass, really, don't you think? All kinds of good friends I see are joining. The question is, if you're just joining now, how many bubbles do you think? Where can I get that glass? I'm going to tell you about that, Lori, in one moment. How many bubbles do you think are in this glass? That's the question. Yeah, this may be, this is a good question because this is a really great glass. 200,000 bubbles. Okay, that's a good guess. People are being shy about guessing. The answer is that there are 1 million bubbles in a glass of champagne. About. And that figure, by the way, comes from the man who has done just about all of the great scientific research on champagne. His name is Gerard Ligier-Belair. He's a PhD at the University of Reims in Champagne. And he was a huge source of information for me for the Champagne chapter of the Wine Bible. But can you imagine a scientist who does nothing but, study and I'm sure drink at the end of the day, all day champagne? So that figure of 1 million comes from him. Speaking of glass, before I tell you why bubbles are so important, lots of people are saying thanks for the glass, but let me talk about glasses for a second because they directly relate to bubbles. So how many of us have, a lot of these? I have a lot of these. I wish I didn't have a lot of these. These really tall flutes, you hand someone a flute of champagne, they sort of stand up taller, they feel, I don't know, sexier or something. But flutes like this are terrible for champagne. Even though they are, you find them in almost every restaurant in the United States. Much better is what is called a tulip glass, a glass that is long enough so that you have a steady stream of bubbles, but wide enough so that you can actually swirl the glass and smell the wine, because champagne is, after all, a wine, smell the wine better. And here's how bubbles connect to that idea. Bubbles, as it turns out, really radically affect a champagne's aroma and flavor. What happens is, as the bubbles rise and then collect on the surface of the champagne, little droplets of champagne are released into the atmosphere and, in fact, into your nose, where you then smell and taste the champagne more fully. The effect is magnified. And even when the champagne is on your palate, those bubbles propel the aroma and the flavor to the back of your palate, to the retronasal passages, allowing you, once again, to smell and taste the champagne more fully. So bubbles aren't just interesting texturally, they really play this quite dramatic role in magnifying the flavors and aromas of any champagne. And again, that's not me talking, that's Ligier-Belair, the PhD in Reims, talking. So, let's see who's jumping on. People are saying, yes, this glass, thank you. My friends who have this glass, versions of which you can see in restaurants, certainly in Champagne, but also all over the US, is from the glasses that I created called the Flavor First collection. And as someone who loves champagne and drinks a lot of it, believe me, in designing a set of glassware, champagne was really uppermost in my mind. So, let's see. And Macy's does have them, that's true. Let's talk about another aspect of bubbles, which may sound unusual, but it's the sound and how sound affects flavor. What gives champagne its sound is, of course, bubbles. And the research here comes out of Oxford University in England, where a PhD there showed that sound is intimately related to flavor. Potato chips, for example, that are crunchier, the more crunchy a potato chip sounds, the more tasters rate it as having a more intense flavor. Well, with champagne, bubbles create a sound, and the more you can hear that sound, the more intense any group of tasters feels that the champagne is. So, I mean, I think I love champagne for its flavor, but none of us have ever tasted a champagne probably without sound coming into the equation, which may, again, magnify its flavor. So life is good with wine is asking, so should we, speaking of sound, should we pop a bottle of champagne loudly? Like, what's the etiquette here? Well, the answer is no, you should not sort of thwack that cork out of the bottle. In fact, when opened correctly, a bottle of champagne should make a sound that, this was before the Me Too era, by the way. In France, they would say, specifically French men would say, when opened correctly, a bottle of champagne should make a sound no greater than that of a contented woman's sigh. That was definitely before the Me Too era. But yes, you're supposed to it's just supposed to make this nice long hiss, not a loud pop. All right, yeah, it really does hit so many senses at once. Thanks for that comment. That is so astute. And maybe that's why those of us who love champagne love it so much, because it's not just the texture of the bubbles, it's not just the sound, it's not just the magnification of aromas and flavors, it's all of these wrapped into what I call a kind of contrapuntal tension of flavor and texture. The best champagnes for me are like a sword wrapped in whipped cream. They both have that tight spinal column of acidity, but then that beautiful creaminess that comes from long aging on the yeast lees. What about savoring? Oh man, thank you, Amy. What a good question. And about an hour ago, I thought, damn, I forgot to bring my saber. I have this absolutely great saber. It's maybe, 3 feet long. And I thought I should have brought the saber, but then I thought, how am I going to saber on Instagram? I mean, I would saber the phone by accident. Sorry, iPhone. But I love sabering. And sabering, if you're not familiar, is you could do it with a kitchen knife. You don't need you shouldn't, do not do this at home in your kitchen or dining room. You should only do it outside. You should wear gloves. You should wear a little bit of protective clothing. But it's the idea of taking a knife, any kind of could be a kitchen knife, it doesn't have to be a long actual champagne saber, finding the seam on the bottle and then very gently hitting it just so that the top of the bottle along with the cork flies off. Here in Napa Valley, some of you may know the winemaker Kathy Corison. Her husband, William Martin, is a great saberer and has taught many of us, me included, how to saber. And William will tell you, he's taught hundreds of people in the Napa Valley how to saber. He will tell you that the best saberers are women, because men try to really do it, and women, and it's a gentle 1, 2, 3, and off goes the top of the bottle and the cork. But don't try this unless you have an instructor. If you're here in Napa Valley, William Martin is the person you want. So, questions. Let's take some questions, not necessarily about bubbles. Lots of people still joining. Oh, I forgot to tell you what I'm drinking. So I love this champagne. It's called Collet. Hold this up for you. Collet, along with Nicolas Foyat, is one of the co-ops in Champagne. And these are the two leading co-ops in I think in my opinion, but in a lot of people's opinions. And they make fantastic champagnes, both of them. And this champagne happens to be just so absolutely delicious. I think sometimes we hear the word co-op and we think, I don't know, that's probably not as good as an actual winery. In Champagne, I think that's not the case. The co-ops have hundreds, sometimes thousands of small, fantastic growers. And both Collet and Nicolas Foyat, for example, are among the top 5 best-selling champagnes in France itself. So I think the idea that you might not want to try a co-op, I think I would not go with that idea because they are in fact, they do in fact produce such great wine. Life is good with wine is really going tonight. She says, so much wine is wasted when savoring, but so much fun. Yeah, when you do savor, that's true. Quite a bit of wine gushes out, and that's not the only thing to watch out for. The other thing is that, of course, once you savor a bottle, there's no putting a bouchon back in it because the whole neck of the bottle is now removed. So you have to drink the whole bottle. So you better have a friend or two over. Because there's no saving the bottle. You've got to now pour it all out. Petable asks, I hope I pronounced that right, what retailers do you recommend for outstanding grower champagnes in the US or in the Napa Valley? Gosh, there are a lot of, 2 online, well, one of them is a retailer in both physical stores and online. Both wine.com and Gary's have huge lists of grower champagnes. I've been on both of those sites recently and thought, because I love grower champagnes too, and thought, maybe they're going to have 20. They both have 60 or more grower champagnes in addition to all of the great Grand Marques like Paul Roger that I just held up, or Taittinger, or Veuve Clicquot, or Moet and Chandon, as well as Nicolas Foyat and Collet, the great co-ops. So that's where I would go first. What are some of my favorite foods with bubbles? We talked about food a lot yesterday. I think you could go one of 2 ways. When I headed up the wine program at the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, out here in Napa Valley, we always said that there are like-on-like comparisons, or like-on-like pairings, and like-against-like pairings. So a like-on-like pairing would be something that is really crunchy and textural, along with champagne, because the bubbles are giving it so much texture. The classic example is potato chips. We have some right here. Or fried chicken, or spring rolls, or anything that has a kind of crunch to it, because the crunch of the food and then that bubbly, effervescent sensation in your mouth is just, textural nirvana. The other is to do the opposite, to do something utterly soft with a champagne that is so textural. So a real creamy cheese or salmon, something that is really soft, that is unlike the bubbles. So let's talk about size of bubbles, because you know, if you have a Coke or any kind of a cola, or Perrier is the best example actually, water, you know that those bubbles are really big and kind of abrasive almost, which can be really great on a hot day. But in champagne, big bubbles are sometimes referred to as, this is meant to be mean, as frog's eyes. In champagne itself, bubbles, the best bubbles are very, very tiny bubbles. The reason is because you can only get tiny bubbles by allowing the champagne to spend a long time on its yeast lees in a really cold cellar. If you produce a champagne pretty quickly, which almost no one does, but if you did, the bubbles would be bigger. They would be more like Perrier bubbles. So when you see these tiny, tiny, tiny bubbles, it's a great sign that the wine has been aged for a long time on its yeast lees and in underground, of course, in one of those deep cellars, the great chalky crayères that are deep underground pits, all underneath the towns and cities of Champagne. So Letzmura says, I know the difference between Champagne, Cava, and Prosecco, but what would be your choice amongst those three? Without taking price into a factor. Champagne and Cava are both made by the traditional method of fermentation, secondary fermentation in each individual bottle. Prosecco is made very differently. Prosecco is made by a quicker process in large tanks. So Prosecco, I think, is a completely different phenomenon than Cava and Champagne. But of course, it's not just whether or not the wine was made in its own individual bottle or in a tank. It's also the soil and the grape varieties. You know, with Prosecco, you're talking about a grape variety named Glera. With Cava, you are talking about 3 different indigenous Penedès grape varieties. Only in Champagne are you talking about Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. So it's almost impossible to compare them directly. But you can tell I super love Champagne. There are times for Cava, there are times for Prosecco, but my heart is often with Champagne. So, truffle chips from Torres are my favorite pairing. Oh, I can't believe I don't have, we have some of those right here in the office. I should have brought them out. I could have held it up as evidence. I completely agree. Those truffle potato chips with Champagne are just, you know, that's all you need, that and a friend. Okay, so any other questions? Let's see. Carlo Mondavi joined. Hi, Carlo. Carlo Mondavi, one of our great friends, one of the top producers of Pinot Noir in California, over in Sonoma, of course, on the Sonoma coast, where so many great Pinot Noirs are made, and a leading light in the California wine world when it comes to sustainability. Carlo, glad you're on. I'm sure he's enjoying some champagne. I think, yeah, I'm sure he is. All right. Letzmura, thank you back. So let me tell you a little bit about how to win one of these fantastic stoppers from the Champagne Bureau. And that is, you could either direct message me and tell me why you really love champagne, or should you be so inclined, send us a video. It'd be fun. We would repost it to our Instagram stories And don't forget to tell us in your video why you love champagne, or maybe what you love to eat with it. And you too could win a stopper and also a fun little tote. So thanks everybody for joining us tonight. And don't forget that we'll be on tomorrow night at 5:30 Pacific time as well, 8:30 on the East Coast. And the going's going to get more complex because we're going to talk about different sweetness or dryness, really, different dryness levels of champagnes, which can seem, on the face of it, a little confusing, but it won't be. You'll see. All right. So cheers to everyone. Hope you're drinking something really great, and hope you're using a really good glass. See you tomorrow.